Sarah Martinez had always been different from other women her age. While her friends spent evenings at coffee shops discussing their office jobs, she was completing underwater demolition training in the cold Pacific waters off San Diego. At 28, she had already earned her place among the most elite warriors in the world as a Navy SEAL. Her journey to this point had been anything but easy. Growing up in a small Texas town, Sarah faced constant doubt from those around her. Her own father, a former Marine, had laughed when she announced her intention to join the Navy. "Women don't belong in combat," he had said, shaking his head. "You should become a nurse or teacher like other girls." But Sarah had fire in her belly that wouldn't be extinguished by anyone's expectations. She excelled in high school athletics, breaking several track records and earning a scholarship to study engineering. Even then, she knew her real calling lay elsewhere. The day she turned 18, she walked into the Navy recruitment office and signed her papers. Basic training had been brutal, but Sarah thrived under pressure. While other recruits struggled with the physical demands, she pushed herself harder than anyone expected. Her instructors noticed her determination immediately. She never complained, never gave up, and always volunteered for the most challenging assignments. The path to becoming a SEAL was even more demanding. Only a small percentage of candidates make it through the grueling selection process known as BUD/S training. Sarah endured weeks of sleep deprivation, cold water exposure, and physical challenges that broke the spirits of grown men. Many of her male counterparts dropped out, but she remained focused on her goal. During Hell Week, the most infamous part of SEAL training, Sarah faced her greatest test. For 5.5 days, she got only 4 hours of sleep total, while completing non-stop physical training in freezing conditions. Her body screamed for rest, her muscles cramped from exhaustion, and her mind played tricks on her. But every time she wanted to quit, she remembered the doubters back home. Her instructors pushed her harder than the male candidates, testing whether she truly belonged among their ranks. They made her carry heavier loads, swim longer distances, and complete more repetitions than required. Sarah understood this wasn't personal hatred, but professional necessity. If she was going to serve alongside these men in life or death situations, she needed to prove she could handle anything they could. The mental challenges proved just as difficult as the physical ones. SEAL training breaks candidates down psychologically, forcing them to discover strength they never knew they possessed. Sarah learned to compartmentalize pain, to function effectively under extreme stress, and to never stop fighting no matter how impossible the situation seemed. When she finally earned her SEAL trident, Sarah had transformed from a small-town girl with big dreams into a lethal weapon, trained in multiple forms of combat. She mastered hand-to-hand fighting techniques from around the world, became expert with dozens of different weapons, and learned to think strategically under pressure. Her teammates initially viewed her with skepticism, but Sarah quickly proved herself during training exercises. She outperformed expectations in marksmanship, demonstrated exceptional tactical thinking, and showed the same brotherhood loyalty that bound all SEALs together. Gradually, she earned their respect through actions rather than words. Sarah's first deployment took her to Afghanistan, where she participated in high-stakes missions deep behind enemy lines. She proved that her training had prepared her well for real combat situations. Her calm under fire and precise decision-making saved lives on multiple occasions. Now, after 3 successful deployments, Sarah was back in the United States for some well-deserved leave. She looked forward to visiting her family in Texas, knowing that her father's opinion of her career had changed dramatically. The same man who once doubted her abilities now bragged to his friends about his daughter, the Navy SEAL. But Sarah's story was about to take an unexpected turn. Sometimes the most dangerous situations arise not on foreign battlefields, but in the quiet corners of everyday life. Her training had prepared her for war, but nothing could have prepared her for what was about to happen during what should have been a peaceful evening in her hometown. The evening started like any other Friday night in downtown Austin. Sarah had driven into the city to meet her college roommate Jennifer for dinner at their favorite Mexican restaurant. After years of military rations and foreign food, she craved the familiar taste of authentic Texas barbacoa tacos. Jennifer worked as a marketing executive for a tech company and lived a completely different life from Sarah's military world. Their friendship had endured despite the distance and different career paths because they shared genuine care for each other. Jennifer provided Sarah with a connection to normal civilian life, while Sarah reminded Jennifer that there was a bigger world beyond corporate meetings and sales targets. They spent 2 hours catching up over dinner, laughing about old college memories and sharing stories from their respective careers. Jennifer was fascinated by Sarah's deployment stories, though Sarah kept the details vague for security reasons. The conversation flowed easily between serious topics and silly gossip about mutual friends. After dinner, they decided to walk around downtown Austin's entertainment district. The weather was perfect, with a cool breeze cutting through the typical Texas heat. Street musicians played on corners while crowds of young professionals and college students moved between bars and restaurants. Jennifer suggested they stop at a trendy rooftop bar she had discovered recently. The place was packed with the usual Friday night crowd, groups of friends celebrating the end of another work week. Sarah felt slightly out of place in civilian clothes, still adjusting to life outside the structured military environment. They found a small table near the railing overlooking the street below. Jennifer ordered her usual cosmopolitan while Sarah chose a simple beer. She had learned long ago that alcohol and military training didn't mix well, so she always remained alert even during social occasions. The conversation continued naturally until Jennifer excused herself to use the restroom. Sarah sat alone, observing the crowd with the tactical awareness that had become second nature. She noticed exits, identified potential threats, and mentally cataloged the people around her, habits that never completely switched off. That's when she first noticed the group of men at the bar who had been drinking heavily all evening. 3 guys in expensive suits who looked like they worked in finance or real estate. Their voices grew louder with each round of drinks, and their behavior became increasingly aggressive toward the female bartender and waitresses. Sarah watched as one of them grabbed a passing waitress by the wrist when she tried to clear their empty glasses. The young woman looked uncomfortable but managed to pull away with a forced smile. This type of behavior disgusted Sarah, but she knew civilian establishments had their own ways of handling difficult customers. When Jennifer returned from the restroom, she immediately noticed Sarah's changed demeanor. "Everything okay?" she asked, following Sarah's gaze toward the rowdy group. "Just keeping an eye on some drunk idiots," Sarah replied quietly. "They're harassing the staff." Jennifer glanced over at the men who were now arguing loudly with the bartender about their tab. "Should we leave?" she asked, sensing tension in the air. Sarah considered the suggestion. Her military instincts told her to extract from potentially dangerous situations when possible. But something about the men's aggressive behavior toward women made her want to stay close in case someone needed help. "Let's finish our drinks first," Sarah decided. "But stay alert." The situation escalated quickly when one of the drunk men knocked over his beer while gesturing wildly during an argument with his friends. The liquid spilled across the bar and onto the floor, creating a slippery mess. When a young waitress approached with towels to clean up the spill, the man turned his alcohol-fueled anger toward her. "Watch where you're going, you clumsy girl," he shouted, even though he had caused the mess himself. The waitress, who couldn't have been older than 22, apologized politely while trying to clean up the spill. Her hands shook slightly as she worked, clearly intimidated by the man's aggressive tone and the attention from other customers. "I said watch it," the drunk man yelled again, this time shoving the waitress hard enough that she stumbled backward. That was enough for Sarah. Her protective instincts, honed by years of military service, kicked into high gear. She stood up from her table, her movement fluid and controlled despite the anger building inside her. "Hey," Sarah called out firmly, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Leave her alone." The drunk man turned toward Sarah with a sneer on his face. "Mind your own business, lady. This doesn't concern you." But Sarah was already moving closer, positioning herself between the aggressive man and the frightened waitress. Years of combat training had taught her to read body language and assess threats quickly. This situation was about to get much worse. The confrontation drew attention from everyone on the rooftop bar. Conversation stopped as people turned to watch the unfolding drama. The music seemed louder now that voices had quieted, creating an odd backdrop to the tense situation. Sarah positioned herself protectively in front of the young waitress, who had stepped back against the bar. The drunk man who had shoved the girl was larger than Sarah, probably 6 feet tall and heavy-set from years of desk work and business lunches. His expensive suit couldn't hide the soft belly and lack of physical conditioning that marked him as someone who had never faced real physical challenges. "I'm making it my business," Sarah said calmly, her voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to flow through her system, apologized to her and walk away. The man's two friends had stopped their own conversation to watch the confrontation. One of them, slightly less drunk than the others, seemed to realize that escalating the situation would end badly for everyone involved. He put a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Come on, Brad, let's just go to another bar," he suggested nervously. But Brad was too intoxicated and too angry to listen to reason. The alcohol had amplified his natural arrogance and dissolved whatever common sense he might have possessed when sober. He saw Sarah's intervention as a challenge to his masculinity, especially coming from a woman who appeared to be smaller than him. "You think you can tell me what to do?" Brad slurred, taking a step closer to Sarah. "Do you know who I am? I could buy this whole place." Sarah remained perfectly still, her body relaxed but ready to react instantly if needed. Her SEAL training had taught her that the best fighters appeared calm before striking. She could smell the alcohol on Brad's breath and see the glazed look in his eyes that indicated seriously impaired judgment. "I don't care who you are," Sarah replied evenly. "You put your hands on someone who is just doing her job. That's not acceptable." The crowd around them had grown larger as word spread about the confrontation. Some people had their phones out, ready to record whatever happened next. The bar security guard was pushing through the crowd, but he was still several yards away. Brad's face reddened with anger and embarrassment. Being lectured by a woman in front of a crowd was more than his alcohol-soaked ego could handle. He clenched his fists and took another aggressive step toward Sarah. "Listen here, you little girl," he snarled. "You better back off before you get hurt." Sarah's training kicked in automatically. She assessed Brad's stance, his hand positioning, and his body language. He was telegraphing his intentions clearly to anyone who knew how to read the signs. His weight was forward on his toes, his shoulders were tensed, and his right hand was drawing back slightly. "Last chance," Sarah warned quietly. "Walk away now." Instead of heeding her warning, Brad let his anger control his actions. He lunged forward with a wild swing aimed at Sarah's face. It was the kind of sloppy, telegraphed punch that someone throws when they've never been in a real fight but have seen too many movies. Sarah moved with the fluid precision of someone who had trained thousands of hours for exactly this type of situation. She shifted her weight slightly to the left, allowing Brad's fist to swing harmlessly past her head. In the same motion, she grabbed his extended arm and used his own momentum against him. The entire sequence took less than 2 seconds. Brad found himself off balance and vulnerable. His own aggressive motion turned into a liability. Sarah had barely moved, but she now controlled the entire situation. "Stop right there." The security guard finally called out as he reached the edge of the crowd. But Brad's friends weren't willing to let their buddy be humiliated by a woman. The one who had tried to calm the situation earlier now decided that their group's reputation was at stake. He moved to flank Sarah from the right side. 3 against 1 isn't fair," he called out, apparently forgetting that his friend had been the aggressor in the first place. Sarah's peripheral vision caught the movement immediately. She was now facing multiple attackers in a crowded space with limited room to maneuver. This was exactly the type of scenario her instructors had drilled into her during close-quarters combat training. The third man, who had been relatively quiet until now, decided to join his friends in what they saw as defending their honor. He began moving to Sarah's left side, attempting to surround her. Sarah realized that the situation had moved beyond simple de-escalation. These men were too drunk and too proud to back down peacefully. They had decided that their wounded egos were worth risking a physical confrontation with someone they had seriously underestimated. The crowd pressed back to give them space, creating a rough circle around the combatants. Some people were calling for security while others seemed excited by the prospect of seeing a fight. The young waitress who had started the whole incident watched in fear from behind the bar. Sarah's mind shifted into combat mode. Her breathing became controlled and steady. Her vision sharpened, taking in every detail of her surroundings. Years of training and real combat experience had prepared her for moments exactly like this one. The moment before violence erupts often feels suspended in time, and Sarah experienced that familiar sensation as the 3 men positioned themselves around her. Her SEAL training had taught her to use these precious seconds to assess threats, plan responses, and prepare mentally for what was about to happen. Brad was still off balance from his failed punch, but his 2 friends were moving with the kind of coordination that suggested they had been in fights together before. The one approaching from her right was younger, and appeared more athletic than the others. He moved with slightly better balance, suggesting some kind of sports background. The third man was older and moved more cautiously, but his eyes showed a calculating intelligence that made him potentially more dangerous than his more aggressive friends. Sarah's body remained loose and ready. Her feet were positioned in a balanced stance that would allow her to move quickly in any direction. Her hands hung naturally at her sides, but every muscle was coiled and ready to explode into action when needed. The athletic friend made the first move, rushing toward Sarah with more speed than his drunk companions could manage. He aimed a tackle at her midsection, apparently thinking he could use his size advantage to overpower her quickly. Sarah sidestepped the charge with minimal effort, using the man's own momentum to send him stumbling past her toward the bar. As he went by, she delivered a precise strike to a pressure point on his neck that instantly disrupted his balance and left him disoriented. Brad, still angry, and now even more embarrassed, charged again with another wild swing. This time, Sarah didn't just avoid the attack, she decided to end his participation in the fight immediately. She caught his arm, stepped into his guard, and delivered a sharp elbow strike to his solar plexus that dropped him to his knees, gasping for air. The crowd gasped and murmured in amazement. Most of them had expected to see the lone woman overwhelmed by three larger men. Instead, they were witnessing a display of skill and training that seemed almost effortless. The third man, the cautious one, had been watching his friend's defeats with growing concern. He realized that this woman was not what she appeared to be. Something about her movement and precision suggested serious martial arts training or military background, but alcohol and pride are powerful forces, and he had already committed himself to the confrontation. Rather than admitting defeat and helping his injured friends, he decided to change tactics. Instead of rushing in for a direct attack, he grabbed an empty beer bottle from a nearby table. "You think you're tough?" he snarled, holding the bottle like a club. "Let's see how tough you are now." The crowd immediately backed away further as the situation escalated to weapons. Several people were shouting for security and police. The young waitress behind the bar was on the phone, presumably calling for help. Sarah's demeanor shifted noticeably. Her relaxed readiness became focused intensity. A drunk throwing punches was one thing, but a weapon changed everything. This man was now presenting a potentially lethal threat, which authorized a much more serious response under both civilian law and military rules of engagement. "Put the bottle down," Sarah commanded, her voice carrying absolute authority. "You don't want to do this." The man with the bottle hesitated for a moment, perhaps recognizing something dangerous in Sarah's tone. But his friends were groaning on the floor around him, and he felt cornered by his own poor decisions. He swung the bottle in a wide arc toward Sarah's head. It was another amateur move from someone who had watched too many bar fights in movies. Real combat was nothing like the choreographed violence of Hollywood films. Sarah ducked under the swing and moved inside the man's reach before he could recover. She grabbed his wrist with both hands and applied a joint lock that forced him to drop the bottle immediately. The sound of breaking glass echoed across the rooftop as the bottle shattered on the concrete floor. Without releasing her grip on his wrist, Sarah pivoted and used leverage to force the man face first onto the ground. She applied just enough pressure to control him completely without causing permanent injury. Her knee pressed into his back, keeping him immobilized while she maintained the wrist lock. "Stay down," she ordered firmly. "This is over." The entire confrontation had lasted less than 30 seconds. Three grown men who had started the evening feeling powerful and entitled were now defeated and humiliated. Brad was still struggling to catch his breath from the solar plexus strike. The athletic friend was holding his neck and trying to figure out why his balance wasn't working properly. The third man was pinned to the ground, completely helpless despite being the largest of the group. Security guards finally reached the scene along with several bar employees. They surveyed the situation with obvious confusion. The three men were clearly the aggressors based on witness statements, but they were also the ones who had been defeated. "What happened here?" the head security guard asked. Multiple witnesses began talking at once, explaining how the men had been harassing staff and had attacked Sarah when she intervened. The young waitress gave a clear account of how Sarah had protected her from Brad's aggression. Sarah released her hold on the man beneath her and stepped back, her hands visible and non-threatening. Her breathing was steady and controlled, showing no signs of exertion, despite having just defeated 3 attackers. "These men were harassing your employee," Sarah explained calmly. "When I asked them to stop, they decided to make it physical. I defended myself." The security guard looked at the 3 men who were slowly picking themselves up from the floor. None of them appeared seriously injured, but they were clearly shaken by the experience. "We're going to need to call the police," the guard said. "This needs to be documented properly." Sarah nodded in agreement. She had nothing to hide and knew that witness statements would support her version of events, but she also knew that her identity as a Navy SEAL would soon become part of the story, bringing attention she would rather avoid. The police arrived within minutes, their red and blue lights casting eerie shadows across the rooftop bar. Officer Martinez and her partner Officer Johnson had responded to countless bar fights over the years, but the scene they encountered was unlike anything they had seen before. 3 well-dressed men sat nursing their wounds and their wounded pride, while a calm woman in jeans and a simple blouse spoke quietly with witnesses. The contrast between the disheveled, clearly intoxicated men and the composed woman was striking. Officer Martinez approached Sarah first, noting her relaxed posture and steady eye contact. Years of police work had taught her to read people quickly, and something about this woman suggested military or law enforcement background. "I'm Officer Martinez," she said, pulling out her notebook. "Can you tell me what happened here tonight?" Sarah provided a clear, factual account of the events, starting with the men's harassment of the waitress and ending with their decision to escalate to physical violence. Her report was precise and detailed, exactly the kind of statement that police officers appreciated from witnesses. "Have you had any military or law enforcement training?" Officer Martinez asked, recognizing the professional quality of Sarah's account. "I'm an active-duty Navy SEAL," Sarah replied simply. Officer Martinez's eyebrows rose slightly. She had served in the Army before becoming a police officer and understood exactly what that meant. SEALs were legendary even among other military personnel for their training and capabilities. Meanwhile, Officer Johnson was taking statements from the 3 men, who were becoming increasingly agitated as they realized how badly they had miscalculated the situation. Brad, the instigator, was demanding that Sarah be arrested for assault. "She attacked us," he insisted, his words still slightly slurred from alcohol. "We were just defending ourselves." Officer Johnson looked at Brad's soft physique and obvious intoxication, then glanced over at Sarah's calm demeanor and athletic build. The physical evidence didn't support Brad's version of events. None of the men showed serious injuries, while multiple witnesses confirmed that they had been the aggressors. The bar's security cameras had captured most of the incident, providing clear evidence of who had initiated the violence. The footage showed Brad pushing the waitress, Sarah intervening verbally, and the men choosing to make the situation physical. As the officers continued their investigation, word spread through the crowd about Sarah's identity. Social media posts were already appearing online, with videos of the confrontation being shared across multiple platforms. The story was taking on a life of its own. Navy SEAL defends waitress from 3 attackers. Jennifer, who had watched the entire incident with a mixture of pride and concern for her friend, approached the officers to give her statement. She had known Sarah for years but had never seen her military training in action before. She tried to de-escalate the situation multiple times, Jennifer told Officer Martinez. She only got physical when they came at her first. She actually showed incredible restraint considering what she's capable of. The young waitress, whose name was Maria, also gave a statement praising Sarah's intervention. She was still shaking from the encounter, clearly traumatized by Brad's aggressive behavior. "He grabbed me and pushed me," Maria explained. "I was scared he was going to hurt me worse. That lady saved me from something really bad happening." As the investigation continued, the 3 men's stories began to fall apart under questioning. Brad's friends eventually admitted that he had been drinking heavily and had initiated the confrontation. The athletic friend, whose neck was still sore from Sarah's pressure point strike, seemed genuinely surprised by how quickly he had been defeated. "I played college football," he told Officer Johnson incredulously. "I thought I could handle one woman. I've never been taken down that fast in my life." Officer Martinez completed her report and approached Sarah with the preliminary findings. Based on witness statements, security footage, and physical evidence, the 3 men would be charged with assault, public intoxication, and disturbing the peace. Sarah would face no charges, as her actions clearly fell under self-defense. "We may need you to testify if this goes to trial," Officer Martinez explained. "But honestly, with this much evidence and this many witnesses, I expect they'll take plea deals." Sarah nodded, understanding the legal process. She had been involved in enough military investigations to know how these situations typically resolved. As the police prepared to leave with the 3 men in custody, Brad made one final attempt to save face. He turned to Sarah with a sneer that alcohol and humiliation had made particularly ugly. "You think you're some kind of hero?" he called out. "You're just a freak who likes to beat up men." Sarah looked at him with the same calm expression she had maintained throughout the evening. She had heard similar comments before from people who couldn't accept that their assumptions about women were wrong. "I'm someone who doesn't tolerate bullies," she replied quietly. "Maybe tonight will teach you to treat people with respect." Officer Martinez led Brad away before he could respond, but his words had been heard by many people in the crowd. Sarah knew that this comment, along with everything else, would soon be part of the online narrative surrounding the incident. The bar manager approached Sarah as the scene finally began to wind down. He was a middle-aged man who had seen countless fights in his years in the hospitality business, but nothing quite like this. "I want to thank you for protecting my employee," he said sincerely. "Maria is a good kid, and I hate to think what might have happened if you hadn't stepped in." Sarah accepted his thanks graciously, but she was already thinking about the implications of what had occurred. Her identity as a Navy SEAL was now public knowledge, and the video footage would likely go viral. Her quiet leave was about to become very complicated. The crowd gradually dispersed, but many people approached Sarah to express their admiration for her actions. Some asked for selfies, treating her like a celebrity. Others simply wanted to shake her hand and thank her for standing up to bullies. Jennifer watched her friend handle the attention with typical grace, but she could see the slight tension in Sarah's shoulders that indicated discomfort with the publicity. "Ready to get out of here?" Jennifer asked quietly. Sarah nodded gratefully. She had accomplished what she set out to do: protect someone who needed help and ensure that justice was served. But she also knew that her story was just beginning to unfold in ways she couldn't control. Sarah woke up the next morning to find her phone buzzing constantly with notifications. Overnight, the video of her confrontation with the 3 men had exploded across social media platforms. The hashtag #the Navy SEAL Hero was trending on Twitter, and news outlets were already picking up the story. She scrolled through hundreds of messages from friends, family members, and complete strangers. Most were supportive, praising her for standing up to bullies and protecting the young waitress. But there were also negative comments from people who criticized her for using excessive force or questioned whether women belonged in combat roles. Jennifer had stayed over at Sarah's hotel room, worried about her friend's reaction to the sudden fame. She watched Sarah reading through the messages with growing concern. "How are you handling all this?" Jennifer asked, bringing Sarah a cup of coffee. "I've been through media attention before," Sarah replied, though she looked tired. "But usually it's controlled through official military channels. This feels different." The hotel phone rang, interrupting their conversation. It was the front desk, informing Sarah that several news crews had gathered in the lobby asking for interviews. The hotel manager was doing his best to keep them out, but the pressure was mounting. Sarah's commanding officer called an hour later. Commander Williams had seen the news coverage and wanted to discuss the situation with her immediately. "Martinez, this is getting national attention," Commander Williams said over the phone. "The Navy is going to want to control the narrative. Are you prepared for what's coming?" Sarah understood the implications. Military personnel, especially Special Operations Forces, typically maintained low profiles to protect their operational security. But this incident had thrust her into the spotlight whether she wanted it or not. "Yes, sir, I understand the situation," Sarah replied. "What are my orders?" "For now, refer all media requests to Navy Public Affairs. We're working on an official statement. And Martinez, you did the right thing last night. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The official statement came later that morning. The Navy praised Sarah's actions in protecting a civilian and noted that she had acted within appropriate self-defense guidelines. They emphasized her exemplary service record and her role as a positive representative of military values. But the story continued to grow beyond what anyone had expected. News programs were running segments about women in combat roles, using Sarah's incident as a focal point for broader discussions about military integration and gender equality. The three men from the bar fight found themselves in an uncomfortable spotlight as well. Their identities had been revealed online, and their employers were facing pressure to respond. Brad, who worked for a prominent investment firm, was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Maria, the young waitress, had also been contacted by numerous media outlets. She gave several interviews praising Sarah's intervention and describing how frightened she had been during the incident. Her genuine gratitude provided powerful testimony about the importance of bystanders willing to help others. Sarah decided to give one official interview to set the record straight and then retreat from the media circus. She chose a respected national news program known for fair reporting rather than sensationalism. The interview took place at a neutral location away from the bar where the incident occurred. Sarah wore her Navy dress uniform, presenting herself as the professional military officer she was, rather than the casual civilian from the viral video. "Many people are calling you a hero for what happened that night," the interviewer began. "How do you respond to that characterization?" "I don't think of myself as a hero," Sarah replied calmly. "I saw someone being harassed and potentially hurt, and I intervened. That's what any decent person should do. But you used military training against civilian men who were drunk. Some critics say that was excessive." Sarah's expression remained composed, but there was steel in her voice when she responded. "Those men made a choice to escalate the situation to violence. I defended myself using appropriate force. No one was seriously injured, and they were stopped from potentially hurting an innocent person." The interviewer pressed further. "What do you say to people who argue that women don't belong in combat roles, using this incident as evidence that female soldiers are too aggressive?" "I would say that this incident proves exactly the opposite," Sarah replied. "I showed restraint when I could have caused much more serious harm. My training allowed me to control the situation without anyone going to the hospital. If anything, this demonstrates why diverse perspectives and skills make our military stronger." The interview continued for 30 minutes, covering Sarah's background, her military service, and her thoughts on the ongoing debates about women in combat. She answered every question with the same calm professionalism she had shown during the original incident. After the interview aired, public opinion seemed to shift even more strongly in Sarah's favor. Military veterans from across the country posted messages of support, sharing their own stories of serving alongside capable women in combat zones. The story also inspired discussions about bystander intervention and personal responsibility. Self-defense instructors reported increased enrollment in their classes, particularly from women who wanted to learn how to protect themselves and others. Brad and his friends pleaded guilty to assault charges and received community service sentences along with mandatory alcohol counseling. Their lawyer had advised them that going to trial against someone with Sarah's credibility and public support would be a mistake. The investment firm where Brad worked ultimately terminated his employment, citing conduct unbecoming of their company values. His friends faced similar consequences at their respective workplaces as companies distanced themselves from the negative publicity. Maria, the waitress, received numerous job offers from other establishments who wanted to show their support for her. She eventually accepted a position at a higher-end restaurant. With better pay and working conditions, the bar where the incident occurred saw a significant increase in business as people came to see where the Navy SEAL fight had taken place. The manager hired additional security and implemented stricter policies about customer behavior toward staff. Member Sarah's family back in Texas was overwhelmed by the attention but proud of their daughter's actions. Her father, who had once doubted her military ambitions, gave interviews to local news stations expressing his admiration for her courage and character. As the initial media frenzy began to die down, Sarah prepared to return to active duty. She knew that this incident would follow her throughout her career, but she was comfortable with the legacy it represented. She had stood up for someone who needed help, and that aligned perfectly with her values as both a person and a soldier. The broader conversation sparked by her actions continued long after the news cycle moved on to other stories. Military recruitment offices reported increased interest from young women inspired by Sarah's example. Self-defense programs expanded their offerings, and bystander intervention became a more common topic in safety discussions. 6 months after the incident in Austin, Sarah's life had settled into a new rhythm. She was deployed again, this time leading a joint operation in Southeast Asia that required the kind of specialized skills that had made her famous for all the wrong reasons back home. The mission was classified, but it involved training local forces in counterterrorism techniques while gathering intelligence on regional threats. Sarah's team respected her leadership and never mentioned the viral video unless she brought it up first, which she rarely did. But the effects of that night continued to ripple outward in ways Sarah never could have imagined. Back in the United States, the story had become part of military training curricula as an example of proper force escalation and de-escalation techniques. Instructors used the security footage to demonstrate how real combat situations differed from Hollywood portrayals. Maria, the young waitress, had thrived in her new job and was now studying criminal justice at a local community college. She credited Sarah's example with inspiring her to pursue a career in law enforcement. She sent Sarah occasional updates through social media, sharing her academic progress and thanking her again for that night. The 3 men involved had taken very different paths after their humiliating defeat. Brad had struggled to find new employment in his field, as background checks inevitably revealed the incident. He eventually moved to another state and took a job with a smaller firm, keeping a much lower profile than before. His athletic friend had used the experience as a wake-up call about his drinking habits and entered an alcohol treatment program. He later reached out to Sarah through her military public affairs office to apologize for his actions and thank her for not seriously injuring him that night. The third man, the one who had grabbed the bottle, had learned the hardest lesson of all. His attempt to use a weapon had resulted in more serious charges, and he served 30 days in jail in addition to his community service. The experience had fundamentally changed his perspective on violence and consequences. Meanwhile, Sarah's commanding officers had taken notice of her natural leadership abilities and her poise under pressure, both in combat situations and in dealing with media attention. She was selected for advanced leadership training and fast-tracked for promotion. The Navy had also recognized the positive publicity her actions had generated. Recruitment numbers among women had increased significantly following the incident, and Sarah was occasionally asked to participate in official recruiting events when her operational schedule allowed. During one such event at a high school in California, a young woman approached Sarah after her presentation. The girl was small and seemed shy, but her eyes held the same determination Sarah recognized in herself at that age. "Everyone tells me I'm too small to be a soldier," the girl said quietly. "But you prove that size doesn't matter if you have the right training and attitude." Sarah smiled, remembering her own doubts and the people who had tried to discourage her dreams. "Size is just one factor," she replied. "What matters most is your commitment to protecting others and serving something bigger than yourself. If you have that, the rest can be learned." The girl nodded eagerly and asked for advice about military preparation. Sarah spent 20 minutes explaining physical training requirements, educational opportunities, and the mental preparation needed for military service. As she watched the girl walk away with renewed confidence, Sarah realized that her actions that night in Austin had created a legacy far more important than any single combat mission. Back on deployment, Sarah's team was conducting a training exercise with local forces when they received word of a developing situation. Intelligence indicated that a group of hostages was being held by insurgents in a remote compound. The rescue mission would require exactly the kind of precision and restraint that Sarah had demonstrated in that Austin bar. As her team prepared for the operation, Sarah reflected on how that confrontation with 3 drunk men had prepared her for this moment in ways she never expected. The principles remained the same: protect the innocent, use appropriate force, and never let bullies win through intimidation. The hostage rescue was successful, with all civilians extracted safely and the insurgents captured alive. Sarah's leadership and tactical decisions had saved lives and avoided the kind of collateral damage that could have escalated regional tensions. Years later, when Sarah retired from active duty with the rank of commander, the Austin incident was just one line in a distinguished service record filled with successful missions and commendations. But it remained the moment that defined her legacy in the public mind. She eventually wrote a book about her military experience, dedicating it to everyone who stands up for those who cannot protect themselves. The chapter about the bar fight emphasized the importance of de-escalation and the responsibility that comes with possessing dangerous skills. Sarah settled in Colorado, where she established a nonprofit organization that provided self-defense training for women and promoted bystander intervention programs. Her instructors taught not just physical techniques but also the mental preparation needed to act decisively when others were in danger. Maria, who had graduated from college and joined the police force, visited Sarah's training center during a law enforcement conference. The two women embraced like old friends, their bond forged in those terrifying moments years earlier. "You changed my life that night," Maria told Sarah. "Not just by protecting me, but by showing me what courage looks like," Sarah smiled, looking around at the training center filled with women learning to protect themselves and others. "You changed mine too," she replied. "You reminded me why all the training and sacrifice is worthwhile." The story of that night in Austin had become more than just a viral video or a news story. It had become a reminder that ordinary moments can require extraordinary courage, and that the greatest strength comes not from the ability to hurt others, but from the wisdom to know when and how to use force in service of justice. Sarah's legacy lived on in every person inspired to stand up for others, in every woman who refused to be intimidated by bullies, and in every young person who looked at her example and decided to serve something greater than themselves. The three men who attacked her that night had learned about the brutal power of a Navy SEAL. But the world had learned something far more important about the enduring power of doing what's right.